Insights channel. Steve here again. I hope you're all doing well in spite of the madness on this planet. As a note, what you recently saw happen in Israel. Well, today I'm going to read to you a little bit from Daniel 7. Now, I spent my whole life studying scriptures and Bible prophecy, and something really sticks out with what's just happened in Israel. Something really sticks out. I'll try and sum this up as best way I can. If you're to know that if you study all the powers that have gone before us, all the world empires, what was their downfall? The downfall of all the world powers was their arrogance. Was the Roman Empire, Grecian Empire, Medo-Persian Empire before them, Babylonian Empire, Assyrian Empire, and before that the Egyptian Empire. Yes, when on their last legs they were exceedingly arrogant, just like Ramses was, and then God destroyed him at the time of Moses, or destroyed Egypt. Now, unfortunately, there's been certain powers that have been ruling, let's say, for the last 250 years or something, ever since so-called democracy has existed in the West, which is really an illusion. But those powers themselves who think they're invincible, and they talk as if they're invincible, and they talk as if the rest of us are just a bunch of cockroaches who should be eliminated soon, and their plans will come into full fruition by the year 2030, when you will own nothing and you will eat bugs and be happy. That's the attitude of the World Economic Forum, which represents all the rich of the world, all the biggest companies in the world, which I recently told you, Putin put them on notice, telling Klaus Schwab of the World Economic Forum, your days are numbered. What I think is happening, which I think is exactly what is prophesied, is that the invincible West, or the invincible so-called nations of the West, are actually on their last legs. That's a hard saying for many of us who actually live here in the West, right? And according to Daniel 7, there are 10 horns who align themselves with the coming little horn, the Antichrist, whoever that might be. Is it Putin? Or is it a younger version of Putin? But anyway, the bad news is that 3 of those 10 horns, according to Daniel 7, are ripped up by the roots. In other words, there's 3 countries in particular that in order for the Antichrist to come into full power with an emerging new world power, 3 nations have to be destroyed. I don't know if they're actually physically totally destroyed, or whether just their governments are uprooted, or whether, more importantly, the powers behind those governments that have been ruling for centuries with all their money and prestige, maybe it's them that get rooted out in order for the Antichrist to rule and Satan to have total control of this planet the way he wants to with the last 7 years of man's rule on the earth. Now, people ask me, what 3 nations do you think that is? Well, I've always thought those 3 nations are the most powerful ones in the West. United States, the UK, and Israel. Of course, you might say, well, Israel's a small nation, isn't it? Yeah, but it's got a big clout for a very small nation. I think it's probably those 3 nations. In other words, if you live in those 3 nations, the United States, Britain, or Israel, those are probably the most dangerous places on earth to be. Because according to Daniel 7, they're going to get uprooted in order for the full power of the Antichrist to take over. But what I think is that the powers that be, especially those who govern and are behind the United States and Israel itself and Britain, they all think they're invincible. They think nobody can shake them. Nobody can take them down because they've got better weapons than anyone else. They've got nuclear weapons. They're much more powerful, much richer than anyone else. Therefore, they think their days is forever. But it reminds of the futility, like Adolf Hitler in the Second World War. He used to say, the Third Reich will last for 1,000 years. Did it? No, it didn't last more than about 15 years. Only a 6-year war. So these world leaders, they get so high and lifted up, and yet they suddenly are destroyed. And I think what we're going to see is the powers that have ruled from whence democracy started about 250 years ago, and capitalism and all that facade, it's going to come crumbling down. And that's by design. It's going to come crumbling down. Something new is emerging. Because the vast majority of the nations of the world that are poorer, they're tired of being exploited by these nations that I've mentioned. They're tired of the exploitation of the West for hundreds of years. So they're crying out for change. And I think somebody's going to fit those boots to bring change. That is what the Bible calls the Antichrist. But also he's got to be pragmatic enough and smart enough to also appeal to Israel. Because we know that Israel and Jerusalem are going to be the capital of the coming Antichrist. But if you look at the situation that's in Israel, either by the horrors mentioned or by design, one or the other, it doesn't really matter, because that confusion that's now started in Israel, and we don't know how far it's going to go, it is very likely to bring on a desire for great change from all the nations, because they're tired of being trampled on by the very rich. They're tired of it. They're tired of the dollar power. They're tired of it. You just talk to any of the people all the name, they'll tell you the same thing. Because in the West, people don't know the oppression that the poor go through in order so the rich can be rich. Because they don't live in those poor countries that are full of war and oppression. So I tell you, I'm not on any side. I'm not on any political side. I just care about the people. I care whether it's the people in Israel. That never should have happened. 1,300 people being massacred in their homes. That's terrible. But it's not right either to go and massacre the Palestinians who have nothing to do with it. They're fighting the wrong people. They're fighting the wrong people. They're not the ones. The people are not the ones guilty. It's never the people. The people are the innocents. They don't have any money or power to do those things. It's the powerful and the rich and the elite who control by oppression and by wars and by destruction and death, and have no conscience because they're run by very evil spirits. But I want to bring a point to people this again. I want to point this out because this was a revelation I got some years ago when I was writing one of my insights books. And that is that after the Tower of Babel, God pulled Satan himself on the ropes and was very angry with him. And he told Satan, look, from now on, you're not allowed to allow total lawlessness. There's a certain point that if you cross it, I'll immediately destroy what you're doing. You've got to be a law and order man now. And then after that came the Egyptian Empire. Well, you know how that ended up. That got destroyed suddenly. Then you had the Assyrian Empire. Also that got destroyed suddenly by the Babylonians. You had the Babylonian Empire. That suddenly got destroyed in a night by the Medo-Persians. And then the very arrogant Medo-Persians, with their Xerxes, this giant of a guy, thought they were invincible, totally destroyed by the Greeks with a tenth of the army, and with Alexander the Great coming on the scene, totally routed the world power. Well, I see that's exactly what's going to happen again. The ones that now rule will be pushed out the picture or pushed underground. Yeah, I know they all work on the same side. They're all satanic, I know. But there are different echelons of Satanism going up and down. And if some of them go too far, they're destroyed for the reasons I mentioned. Because they're doing too many bad things. It's too lawless, and they're going against God's commandment he gave to Satan himself. The people working under you, they can't allow total lawlessness. That is what I saw, and I got that about 5 years ago. I saw that. And it's true, it's proving itself to be true. And I think they've just reached that point now with what's happening in Israel. They've reached that point of total lawlessness. And things are not as they seem. They're not as they seem at all. It's all done. It's part of the plan. But I think they're not counting on things going the way they will do. Because somebody has been keeping an eye on all these people have been doing, including the United States and Israel and all these powers like Britain, what they've been doing all these years and what they've been doing for hundreds of years. Somebody's keeping an eye on them. Somebody smarter than all of them put together. I can't tell you I know who it is. I suspect I know who it might be. I've said sometimes I've often thought that Putin had a lot to do with the coming Antichrist, but I don't know. I think he's a bit too old for being Antichrist. But he's very pragmatic, he's very smart, he sees the whole picture, he avoids trouble. He's been very clever the last 20 years, but it's going to be somebody like him, pragmatic, keeping on top of things, even when they try to kill him and get rid of him left, right and centre. That's the powers of the world trying to do. But a lot of people tell me, yeah, but don't you think Stevie's on the same side as the rest of them? They're all on the same side, they're all controlled by the bankers. Well, it was that way. In Putin's case, he was trained by them. As I said before, he used to be the head of the KGB. Nothing good said about somebody of that calibre. And the oppression he must have done on his own people. You're talking about satanic powers, satanic people, most of the time. I can't say I know about Putin, because now Russia's turned away from red communism and seems to be like a Orthodox Christian nation. But is it a facade? Is it true? Well, maybe you know better than I do. You know, I'm open to suggestions from people. I'm open to what you think too. I'd love to hear from any one of you. Know what you think. But I tell you, we're living in very interesting times, because according to Daniel 7, there's coming 10 horns that came out of Europe, or came out of the Roman Empire, and that include nations that came out of nations like Britain, including the United States, Australia, New Zealand, other nations. What I'm concerned about is I might myself be living in one of those nations that are going to get ripped up by the roots, because they're controlled for too long. And in order for the Antichrist to take over, he's got to get rid of these powers, these arrogant ones. You can see them, you always hear them talking arrogantly. It's very sad, you know, when leaders are not there for the people, but they're there to oppress and make slaves of the people and steal everything. Jesus said that the leaders should be servant of all, like he was. If we're like Christ, we serve others, we help others, we live for others, we don't live for ourselves. We don't live just for money and mammon. There's so much. I tell people, look, what is the point of building an empire for money? What is the point? I myself, my relatives are aristocrats. My grandfather was an aristocrat, millionaires. They had everything. When I was young, I didn't want anything to do with it. In fact, my father didn't either. My father told him to take a hike. I have relatives of lords, barons, and my family for centuries were from that kind of background. But I never wanted it. No, I chose to be a missionary instead and tell others about Jesus. Because I don't want anything to do with the aristocracy. Because I could see right through them, even when I was young. Didn't like it. You know, I haven't seen anything good come out of royalty and aristocracy. I haven't seen much good in there. These people don't even know what it's like to be the little guy at the bottom. I do. I've been all over the world telling us about Jesus, but just being a nobody. Just being nothing in this world, because I don't consider wealth and money to be the aim of life. Jesus said, and so did the prophets in the Old Testament, said the same thing. Love God, love your neighbor as yourself. What's the point being here and making yourself a name and make yourself rich and getting a big title or what? It doesn't mean anything, because it's not of eternal value. It's just of physical value now. And it says, like King David said, what is a man's life? Is it not 70 years, about 70? I'm 71 now. I thank God for every day over 70 I have. You don't get much time here. So the time you have here, you need to use very wisely. It gives me great sadness when I see the nations fighting each other over land and making wars over next to nothing. And now you've got the situation in the Middle East that looks very dangerous, very precarious. And I do appreciate all the comments from a lot of people in Israel who've spoken the truth about what's going on. And we're not stupid. The peoples of the earth, we can see through all their tricks now. By the millions. There's millions of us who know what's going on. We know about the manipulation. We know about all the lying. We know what these scumbags are like. You think they're the elite that rule, but their days are numbered. I'm here to tell you their days are numbered, just like Putin said to Klaus Schwab. Your days are over. There's going to emerge something new. And I'll tell you this, even with the Antichrist himself, he starts off doing a good job. He starts off by making a covenant of 7 years, or agreeing to a covenant of 7 years to make peace between Israel and the Muslims and the other nations. He does a good job. And he takes from the rich and he gives to the poor. Now, what communist leader or socialist have you ever seen has actually done what they say and divided up the land for gain given to the poor? Well, that's what the Antichrist is going to do. That's what it says here right in the Bible. You can read it in the Bible. Read Daniel 7, read Daniel 8, read Daniel 9 and 11. It's amazing what it talks about the Antichrist. It's not all bad. He starts off good. Of course, eventually things go sour. But initially, things are different than they are now. It brings in fairness for the poor. It brings in jobs and work for those who don't have any. And it shouldn't be that just a few nations have the big apple and the rest of them have got a rotten apple. Everybody should have the opportunity of having an apple to eat off the tree of wealth. Well, things are going to change under the coming Antichrist. It's not going to be all bad. Things are going to change. The question is, because of what's just happening in the Middle East now, the Middle East has always had something important to do with change of world powers, always, all through history. All those world powers, the six have gone before us, were centered around what was going on in Israel. Yes, it's quite amazing. I think now what's happening in Israel, I just hope they don't go too far in their retaliation, because that could stir up something really sinister. I'm hoping and praying that God himself will not allow something like a nuclear war, that will not happen until all light has left the planet. In other words, all of God's children that believe in him, believe in Jesus, they're already gone home in the rapture before the darkness completely ascends out of the bottomless pit and terrible things happen like a nuclear war. I don't think we're going to see that while we're here. Don't think so. But I want to bring your attention to Daniel 7. It's a fantastic chapter because it gives you a perfect description of the coming Antichrist and the powers that stand up against him that are totally destroyed. You have to understand the Antichrist cannot be stopped. He cannot be stopped by man because he's not human. He's either not human or he's a hybrid, some sort of hybrid creature. But it's interesting. You don't have to be afraid of the fulfillment of biblical prophecy. It's very interesting. Very, very interesting. And God will give all of us the grace to face whatever we have to face. And he'll give us the anointing so we can tell others about him. The main thing is tell people about Jesus so others can be saved. So others can have Jesus in their hearts and they can also go to heaven. Because that's eternal value. That's what I've always been fighting for all my life, for the last 50 years. Get people saved. Encourage them to ask Jesus in their hearts, because that's eternal value. That's worth much more than money and buildings and a position or me being a Lord. I don't want to be Lord Stephen. I'm not interested. I think it's childish what the rich fight for here. Only to find it's not worth anything. Because you can't take it with you when you die. You have to fight for eternal values, like love, peace, equality, helping others, caring for others. And as I said before, each one of you out there needs to know you're very important. Every one of you is very important. Each one of you has an eternal soul. Each one of us lives forever. So it's very important what you do with your life. Very important you sow good things, positive things, helpful things, loving things. That is the way of the future. The good news is to know that when Jesus returns, he'll put an end to the evil. The evil will get locked up in a bottomless pit for 1,000 years, including Satan and all his imps. And you'll have a golden age of the millennium, when things will be with Jesus ruling and the saints ruling, and he'll make it the way it ought to be, or should have been the last 6,000 years. Then there's a final fling by the devil, the end of the golden age. He gets let out the lock-up of the bottomless pit, goes out to deceive the nations, and then finally God's fed up with the whole thing and he sends fire and burns them all up and yucks the devil in the bottomless pit where the beast and the false prophet are, according to Revelation 20. So, and that'll be the end of evil once and for all. Then you have the new heaven, new earth. I'm looking forward, and I fight for an age when there is no evil. There are no evil people anymore. And the ones that were evil have changed. They've altered. Universal reconciliation. I believe it's going to happen. I believe eventually everybody will change. Everybody will go the right direction, become good. Eventually, yes. Eventually they will. I have no desire to see anybody on this planet or anybody suffer. I just want them to learn what God says, to do what God says. And he says, love God with all your heart, all your soul, love your neighbour as yourself. It's putting it into practice is not always so easy. Anyway, that's a little bit I'm quoting here from Daniel 7. But I ask again for your prayers for the situation in the Middle East. Very, very concerned what just happened in Israel, and I'm very concerned for the Palestinians there in Gaza. Very, very concerned, because this thing shouldn't be happening. Should not be happening, and I'm very concerned that it won't blow into a much bigger Middle East war, or even a world war. Please pray that does not happen. Thanks for listening. I would encourage you to do get my Insights books. My Insights book, 8 of them, are based on Apocryphal books, many of which used to be in the King James Version of the Bible until 1885. They were taken out for whatever reason. I think it was because the Bible was too big and heavy, so they decided to separate into 2 different volumes. But it had a great disadvantage for those of us in the West, because most people don't read the Apocryphal books anymore. And the Apocryphal books have a lot of secrets in them, a lot of foundation stones in them, jewels in them, priceless books. I wouldn't be without, for example, the ancient Hebrew book of the books of Enoch, and I wouldn't be without the Hebrew book of Jasher and Jubilees. They give us incredible insight about how it all began, how creation began, how it all started. And also the lost books, Adam and Eve, which all these books are in my Insights books, like Eden Insights, Enoch Insights, even Testament 12 Patriarchs Insights, Jasher Insights, Jubilees Insights, EZDRAS Insights. I encourage you to get my Insights books, because I'm telling you, one of these days you won't be able to get books. One of these days the whole system's going to break down. I don't know when, but what would be good to have, if the internet goes down for a season, have some good books to read. Study book, that's what they are, they're study books. Study in Scripture, and study in how to be close to God and Jesus. How to be ready for what's coming. So I would encourage people, do get the books while you can. You can either get them from me, Steve, by writing to me at stephen@btinternet.com, or you can get them from Amazon for the time being. But really keep your eyes on events as you've just heard of in Israel. I'm very concerned about the situation. I think a lot of people are too. Just pray it doesn't blow out of proportion and get totally out of control. So, thanks for listening. And I have 2 other books too. It's on the supernatural, paranormal, Out the Bottomless Pit, 1 and 2. I hope this has been helpful. I'm giving you a little taste of Daniel 7. I've only given you a tiny bit from Daniel 7, but it's especially the section about the 4th beast, talk about the Antichrist, that emerges out of the old Roman Empire, that I find most fascinating. But read it yourself, read Daniel 7. You'll find it fascinating. Bye for now.